Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you once again for joining us. It has been a pleasure. We're now like 8 or 9 months into this thing. We started in August of last year, and the numbers continually go up. I think we are now approaching about 8,000 downloads over the last 7 or 8 months. And for those of you who don't know, we simulcast this particular podcast also on YouTube. So if you ever want to see our smiling faces, you can go to YouTube and see us. And then we're also available on, I believe, 11 different podcast platforms, including Google, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, SoundCloud, all the big boys. And I haven't figured out whether or not our numbers include those numbers as well. But I know when I look at the analytics, there are a lot of people who listen to the podcast on both Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. And so I'm at Hurst. This is their diamond celebration. 60 years they've been in the business. We're here in Savannah, Georgia. And I've met some wonderful people. You'll be hearing many interviews that I've conducted over the last couple of days. But today I get to talk to a good friend of mine, and he's out of our home state of Georgia, which we're here now. Mr. John Hurst. He is the Assistant Deputy Commissioner for the Division of Child Support Services, and I probably jacked his whole title up, but
you actually nailed it. That's pretty good.
I got it, yeah. But he's the man. He's the man, and we've done some work together that we'll talk about, and I just wanted him to come in for us to have a conversation because it's good to hear the voices as we see the faces. We're out there of the work that we're trying to do in this great state of Georgia. John, how you doing?
Doing good. Appreciate the invitation.
How you enjoying the conference?
It's been a great conference so far. It's as the host state. Of course, we were very excited to have Hurst come join us here, and as you said, the great state of Georgia, and of course, Savannah's perfect setting for it. But the response to the conference has been incredible. I think we've got 573 attendees here this year, which is a great number for this conference, and as the host agency and host state, we were able to provide about 36 volunteers from our division.
Okay,
we've had probably 6 or 7 people asked to be presenters in different workshops and things. So it's just been a great week, and Georgia's been very happy to step up and extend some Southern hospitality to our friends.
Yeah, I got a chance to go out. So I think I've been to Savannah once.
Okay.
And so, but while I've been here, I haven't gone out. I've just been talking. Every time I move somewhere, I get in a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
Because it's so local to the eastern side. There's so many Georgia people here, Louisiana people here, Mississippi people here. And because we're so close in proximity, we've just been having these conversations about how we're going to work together and how we're going to do more fatherhood work. So it's been a really cool experience.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I encourage you to try to get out, at least walk up and down River Street a little bit while you're here.
Well, actually, after I'm done with you, I'm heading back home because I got to get in front of that traffic.
Maybe next time.
So next time, absolutely. So I was reading somewhere, I think it was on the website, and it talked about your journey into your current position, and it said that you used to work as an outreach worker or a clerk or something for the city or for the state of Georgia. Talk to me about your journey. How did you get from that point to this point?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask that because I actually just was the moderator for a workshop on professional development, and we had some just great leaders on that panel. But my journey to where I'm at now is pretty typical in child support. I started as a frontline agent in the Atlanta office, and that was back in 1990, I believe. And from there, just kind of learned the job. And back then, child support was a lot different than it is now. We could probably talk about that a little bit more later. But shortly after that, in 1994, the state privatized the non-public assistance caseload in the Atlanta area. And so I went with the vendor that came on board to do that as a supervisor, and stayed with them for about 4 years. And then that contract came up for rebid, and another vendor actually won the rebid, so I went with them as an operations manager, which is kind of like an office manager in the Atlanta office. So I stayed with them for about 7 years, and then the state ended up taking those cases back, and eventually I moved back to the state child support agency as a supervisor again up in the Gwinnett office, and from there just kind of progressed. Interesting step after that was I went to our performance management section, which is kind of responsible for the internal audit process for the division. And that kind of forced me to really learn the federal regulations and what's required of the division and child support program, and then how we here in Georgia are doing in as far as performance goes. So did that for about 3 years, and then opportunity came for an office manager position out in Cobb County. Took that, and then became a region manager, and then ultimately a deputy director, and now director.
So you've been through it.
I've been through it. Started as a baby on the front line, and now kind of run the shop a little bit.
Yeah.
With the help of a lot of great people.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. I was actually talking to my staff, and I was talking to them about how I have to begin to start bringing them with me to these conferences, because one of the things that these conferences do for you is it broadens your thinking process when it comes to specifically child support, right? Because when you're on the ground workers, case managers, facilitators, you can almost work yourself in a bubble where you're so focused on working with fathers that you don't have the perspective of the bigger picture, which means you can't translate and transfer that information to dad so that they understand what they are in the midst of. And so when you talk about your path and your journey, what has changed? What's changed from the beginning to now?
So I think the best way to describe it, the simplest, is when I started, Georgia's program was known as the Office of Child Support Enforcement, and now we're the Division of Child Support Services. So even though that one little word, enforcement, replaced by services, sounds simple, it's a complete change in approach to what we do. We're still suffering from those days of the enforcement mindset, because I was there and I was part of it, but the focus was on collections, everything you can do to get the collections in and all that. But now we're really more focused on providing services to parents and to families to help. Ultimately the goal is to support the children and make their lives as best possible. But in doing so, there is a court order there, and one person is required to pay whatever it says on the court order, and the other person receives it. But there's a lot that goes into that. And we have found over the last probably 10, 15 years that the correct approach is really to help parents who are court ordered to pay child support be in a position where they can support their children, and if they're not, help them to get to that point. And that's what we're really focused on these days.
Yeah, one of the things that I was talking to a young lady about yesterday, and I said, I work primarily with dads, and for the most part, they're not many dads who don't want to pay child support.
Exactly.
It's not an issue that they don't want to pay. It is the circumstances and situations that they're in that serves as barriers and challenges for paying. There's some guys out there that you have to kind of pull along, and you have to go through all of the enforcement mechanisms that you have to go through in order to get them. But even working with those dads, I was talking to Judge Corpeny from North Carolina. He was talking about how in North Carolina they're using trauma-informed practices to teach the judges to kind of understand the traumatic impact and ACEs that fathers and families are dealing with when they're standing before them in court, to really understand and have a different level of empathy for them. When you think about the changes in how child support is morphing now to really look more specifically at providing services, what do some of those things look like?
Yeah, and I think Georgia's a really good example, because I feel like our state's been a leader in providing some of those services to fathers. And we have a couple of programs that really focus on that, and we were really the first state to kind of introduce a statewide fatherhood program, and that started back around 1997. But what that program does for parents that are unemployed or underemployed, that may be struggling to make their payments for those barriers. It provides them an opportunity to come in and participate in that program, and we help them to get in a position to become employed, through some soft skill type things and, resume writing and maybe some short-term training courses through technical colleges. But also we have great relationships with some employment resources, Department of Labor, Goodwill, and things like that. So we have what we call fatherhood agents that will work closely with the parents that are participating in the program to get in a position to become employed and actually help them find a job. So we've had some great success on that. I got a little bit of data here. Just last year, we had about 4,500 parents enroll in that program. And from that, there was about $5.2 million in payments made by those participants, which benefited over 10,500 children. So,
okay.
And then we also try to keep in touch with them afterwards just to make sure that they have any other issues come up that we're there to kind of help as well.
Well, we've also had the pleasure of working with you for the last couple of years, and now many of your fathers are coming through our Next Level Fatherhood and our Life Skills curriculum, which is kind of cool. We actually have a graduation that happened a few weeks ago where we had some guys now walking across the stage with our other fathers, and we're happy to kind of do the work that we're doing in Metro Atlanta. We have a fire grant from HHS Office of Family Assistance, and we're every cohort, every quarter, we're graduating 50 plus fathers. And my goal and hope is that those are fathers that don't have to show up in your face in child support, right? And so we're charged with doing 900 over the next 5 years. I think we just eclipsed and went over the 400 mark so far. And many other conversations and people are coming to our space that we have to figure out how to work with. As you're working with your dads, what are you seeing as the biggest challenges today?
There's a lot of things. Kind of going back to what you were saying before, as far as most people want to pay child support. There's it's kind of divided into maybe 4 different categories. There's those that are able and willing, and that's the majority of them to make the payments. And that, in Georgia, that's probably about 65% of the people on our caseload. Then there's those that are willing but unable, and those are the ones that we reach out to through our outreach programs to try to help them get in a position to where they can support be responsible for the court order. There are those that are unwilling and able. Those are the challenging ones. Those are the ones that we usually see a judge. And then there's those that are unwilling and unable, and that's a very small percentage. But those also we can reach out to and try to help as well.
Have you created any relationships with the court system? Because I know that a lot of people. I think some people know, most people don't know, I cut my teeth in the New York State Child Support Enforcement Office over the first 5 years of my entry into this work, and I learned a lot. Like you said, it wasn't the same back then as it is now, but it really helped me understand the complexity of the system, the mission of the system, and the need for the system. It helped me understand all of those things. And so one of my charges when I worked for them was going around the state of New York, talking to all of the judge magistrates across the state, trying to get them to understand what we were doing and how things we were doing impacted them, and to understand how things they were doing impacting us. I'm sure that there's been some level of that work done here in Georgia.
There has been, and we've got a really innovative and great program called our Parental Accountability Court program in Georgia. This was something we kind of was tested a little bit in North Carolina back in the late 2007, 8, somewhere around that area. But we borrowed the concept from them. And in 2009, we had a judge out in Carroll County really pilot it for us, and but it's taken off since then. But what that program is these are for parents that are kind of facing the contempt process. So it really works as an alternative to incarceration that gives the judge that option. So people that are facing contempt, if they're interested in going into the program, it's still a voluntary program, even though they're in that contempt situation, but it provides some really intense case management. We have a PAC, Parental Accountability Court, we call it PAC. We have a PAC coordinator that works in each circuit and that participates in it. And they work very closely with the participants in the program. And they, again, it's even more intense in our fatherhood program. They can help with employment issues. They can also, we have partnerships where we can help with substance abuse issues and things like that. Just really most any barrier that a father is having, we can assist with and get them back on track. And that program typically takes 12 to 18 months for somebody to get all the way through it. But like you were mentioning, your graduation, we have graduations, packed graduations for each circuit also. And just to kind of clarify, Georgia has 50 judicial circuits, and we have a pack in 43 of them currently. So it's almost statewide, not quite. But that is a partnership with the Superior Court judges in each of those circuits. It's basically they're volunteering to spend, it's an hour, 2 hours a month for those hearings to help the fathers in the program to really just give them some encouragement and help them to get to where they need to be. And I think for the fathers that are participating in it, when they get that pat on the back from the judge to encourage them to keep going and keep trying and keep working on what they're working on, that goes a long way. And then the graduations are awesome. Those are my favorite days, and what we do in child support is to see somebody who came into the program, facing possible incarceration to, 12 to 18 months later, they've been working for 6 months, making child support payments. A lot of times they've reunited with their children or their the family and improved their relationship with the custodial parent. But just some of those stories, and just a lot of times they'll give the judge a hug at their graduations. Just so, that's just a visual. That's really cool on my part.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the pleasure of speaking. John invited me to come and speak at their annual meeting not too long ago. And I could tell you that I love speaking to child support people and just talking to them about fatherhood because I understand them. I understand. And the reception that I got afterwards was just so incredible. There were so many people that came up and said, thank you for what you said. Let's work together. And several people have reached out to me, and we're having conversations. And I made a commitment that day that if you call me, I'm coming.
Yeah, I think, sorry to cut you off, but I think it's important for the audience also to know that we've got that reputation of an enforcement agency, and that's really not who we are anymore, and that's not who we want to be. We're here. We sincerely want to help people get better their position in life, and the challenge is connecting with those parents because they don't trust us, and understandably so. So, I think your organization does a great job of trying to build that trust and educate the folks out there that it's not the same child support agency it used to be. Right.
And we're all trying. We're all reaching. We're all trying to figure this thing out because I said in my workshop that I did day before yesterday is that we all want the same thing. We want moms to be, supported financially. We want children to be the beneficiary of that support. We expect that dads are going to hold up at least their half of the responsible bargain in doing that stuff. And so while we don't always like the way it's done, the fact that it needs to be done is not going anywhere. And part of the process that we're in right now is trying to figure out the best way to do that, right, without all of the emotion. But one of the things that I thought when I left there that day, as I said that, oh yeah, just call me, I'll come and see you. I was like, there's 159 counties in the state of Georgia. Given the fact, and I always say this, that child support is federally mandated and regulated, statewide administered, but locally implemented. Does that cause a level of complexity for you in Georgia?
Yes and no. I mean, all states have to follow the federal requirements, and a lot of those requirements were put in place in the 1975 and 1980s, and then so the world has changed a little bit since then, and so we are kind of stuck in having to do some of those requirements that may not be things that we like doing, but we are required to do them. But I think Georgia, Yeah, we've got a good history, and also our structure is favorable to where we can have some impact on statewide what we do, because we're state administered and state run, where there's a lot of states across the country that don't have that structure. They might be county administered, where each county in the state has its own little child support program. So you can imagine the complexities for that. But so we're able to have some influence on kind of the big picture as a whole for the state. So that's really helpful.
Because you guys are broken down into regions too, right?
We are. We have really 10 different regions across the state. We have 55 total offices in Georgia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much one for each judicial circuit. I always struggle with that word. But yeah, so we're kind of focused on the judicial circuit, but then we have offices set up by region also.
Are there areas of the state that are a little more challenging than others?
Yes. I mean, our Atlanta office is probably the most challenging, just because it's the largest caseload, and in the world that we're in right now, with people able to go work kind of wherever they want to and work from home, we're like everybody else struggling to find people to come in and that they want to work. And right now we've got over 20 vacancies in that office, which is a challenge. And we're doing everything we can to get them filled, but it's almost as soon as somebody comes in, then somebody leaves. So I give a lot of credit to Governor Kemp. He last year in his budget, he provided a nice raise to all state employees, and another one this year. So he's done what he can do to try to keep the state competitive as far as attracting people to come work, but it's still a struggle. And a lot of people from the pandemic are really learned and enjoyed working from home, and we have to have people in the offices at times and go to court. So
and it's expanding. This is a lot of growth. In particularly in Atlanta, you and I could tell when we're driving. The amount of growth that is happening in this area. Is that causing some challenges as well? Because you have often tell there's more people in Atlanta that are not from Atlanta that grew up in Atlanta,
right?
And I'm sure that those issues and challenges that they had in their home states are coming here and part of this infrastructure. Are you seeing some of that as well?
Yeah, we are. I heard a stat one time that kind of blew my mind, but within a 20-mile radius of the center of Atlanta, more than half the state population lives there.
Wow.
So, and we feel it on the roads, but just getting the kind of worker and the quality worker we want, with the heart for doing this kind of work, is just gotten challenging. So.
And so Georgia has this other nuance that we work very hard at, and that's this issue of legitimation, right? And so we have done a lot of work around trying to put together a range of services that will help fathers in that space. There was a dissertation that an individual who used to work for the state of Georgia, Dr. Shalonda Smith, did her dissertation on legitimation, and there was a piece in there that was just really interesting to me. I always talk about it when I see it, and it said that fathers who do not have both custody and parenting time are least likely to pay child support.
Right.
Fathers who have parenting time and not custody are a little more apt to pay child support, but fathers who have both custody and parenting time are more apt to pay child support. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is a doable thing, because if we can help fathers get stable enough to go into courts and get some level of custody and some level of parenting time, then that reduces the issues that child support has on these fathers who don't have both, right? Who are less likely to pay child support because their thing is, I have no access to my child and no legal access to my child. And so we've created a lot of assets. We now have videos. We just launched a pamphlet on a guide to legitimation in the state of Georgia. We've done we have legitimation classes with Georgia law that we do once a month, and now we're having 15 to 20 guys come into this thing. And since November of last year, we've been able to help almost 150 dads complete the legitimation petition that's certified by Georgia Legal Aid that can actually go to the courts and for them to go per se. Now, here's the issue with those fathers. The issues with those fathers is that of the 150 or so that now have completed that form, free of charge, I might add, right? Because it costs on average $5,000 to get a legitimation case per child if they have different mothers. Only 25% of them have actually gone to the court.
Okay.
And the reason that they have not gone to the court, we have learned, is because they don't want to disrupt the relationship that they believe they have with the mother of their child, because they believe that this is going to cause a disruption in their lifestyle. Yeah. And what we've been talking to them about is, no, it's a matter of how you have the conversation. So as a result of that, we also created a brochure called Embracing Legitimation for Moms that kind of spells out the benefit for the child, the benefit for her, and the benefit for him that we hand dads. So when they're going to have this conversation before she's served or before you even start, go and hand this to her and then have this conversation. And if she doesn't understand that, call us and we will help them understand it. That level of service for us is happening in our kind of grant jurisdiction, which is the 7 counties around Atlanta. But ultimately, as we continue to move, we're beginning to get more and more calls from other parts of the state. Right, where guys are saying, wait a minute, I'm watching your folks' Facebook posts and I'm watching all this stuff. How can we get this? And the great thing is, because of the pandemic, because most of our classes are now virtual, it really doesn't matter where they are in the state. We can still serve them. Now, we can't count them in our grant because they're outside of jurisdiction, but we can still serve them in that space. Have you seen legitimation, or have you guys even paid any attention with respect to how that's impacting child support?
Yeah, we definitely have an understanding of how it impacts. The challenge is there's a gap in the child support program, and from the federal requirements and things like that. But custody and visitation issues, we cannot address those as a child support agency. But what we've done in Georgia, and I think all states do this, is there is what we call an access and visitation grant that the federal government provides each state, and then we support that with just some additional funds that we have access to. So we have an access and visitation program in Georgia where we can't do the service, but we can refer parents, on our caseload to somebody that can provide the service to them. So that's how we kind of get around that in our state. And not all counties have it, but most do in Georgia. And for those, if there's somebody that doesn't have access to it where they live, there's usually one of the partners that we have will kind of reach out and help them anyway. So, but yeah, it's a huge challenge in Georgia, and I think we're the last state that's a challenge in. So, Georgia.
Yeah, no, we're working on it. And I was telling Tangela, I was like, one of the things my approach, or Fathers Incorporated's approach, is to create proof of concept, right? Because I think every other time that someone has tried to go in to try to do anything has gone in there on emotion. And emotion is not going to get you anywhere. You got to make the case that this is an issue, that it exists, and this is what it impacts. And if we were to change this or eliminate this, this is the benefits that we will get from that. And that benefit ultimately for the state of Georgia has an positive economic impact, right? If we could do that for the families of Georgia. It was interesting because that's the other place that we realized the impact of having 159 counties, right? Because when we put the system together, and we were being coached by a couple of different attorneys that was kind of helping us to figure out the process. And when we got to the petition form, we realized that the petition form possibly looks different in every county. Right, just about. Fulton County's petition form is kind of the standard template, but it still looks different. And so on our website, our case manager I had my case manager actually call all 159 counties across the state to get their petition form. And it was an interesting response because there are a few of them that had no idea about legitimation. And it may not have been the office. It may have just been the individual that we were talking to. And some of the counties were saying that we don't deal with that here, which is probably not true. It's probably the individual, not the office itself. And so one of the things I said to Michelle, somehow one of the things that I want to do at some point, I want to put together a survey and send it out to all 159 counties and see if we can get some data back on how they are seeing that impacting their particular offices, and so that we can share that information with you in your office to tell you what we're finding. Having said that, how can organizations help you, right? Because part of what I understand in doing this work is that as apprehensive sometimes as child support offices are to reach into organizations and communities and organizations are just as apprehensive in reaching back. Right. Sometimes neither of those are happening, and there's a gap in between because they're not connecting. How do we connect that gap in Georgia? How can people get involved with child support and help you with some of the things you're trying to do?
I think there's a lot of different ways, but one of the ways, we make most of our decisions based off of data, and as you mentioned, gathering that data. So, data like that is helpful to us so that we can reach up to Tangela in the federal office and share that information, because that's how things get changed is by it's a process, and because it's state and federal government, it can be a slow process at times. But really, sharing information back and forth and data back and forth between organizations is helpful. For us, as I mentioned before, we have transitioned what our approach is, and just helping getting that message out there is a huge help. People don't trust us. A lot of people don't trust us, and just kind of building that, I guess, repairing that gap there, and helping to rebuild that trust, or build that trust in the first place, really now. So things like that are very helpful. We have another organization that works with us in our fatherhood conversations, which is the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, and I know you're familiar with them. And, they're really good at getting out in the community and kind of encouraging people, hey, it's okay to come listen to this fatherhood conversation. It's okay to go see the fatherhood agent and hear what they have to say and stuff like that. So
one of the other things that we're learning, because we're always collecting data, and I probably should keep you more in that pipeline of sharing what we're learning, and also sending you our reports, because we have to report to the federal government. So we create these reports for public consumption, so they kind of know what we're doing here in Georgia. But the other thing that we're noticing, and this is just in the last 3 years, and that is in our intake forms, we always ask what's your top 3 needs. And when we first started doing that, the number one need was child support legal, and then it was employment, parenting skills, mental health, and housing. Housing was number 5. Now, housing is number 1, and child support has actually dropped down to number 4. It has shifted down, and we're trying to figure out what is making that happen in the state of Georgia. So in a focus group that we did with several dads kind of asking about needs, one of the things that we learned is that things like custody and parenting time are now connected to one's ability to have stable housing. And because of what's happening with housing as a result of the pandemic and things where, guys lost jobs and fathers lost jobs and they haven't regained their jobs and they're working in the gig economy and they're doing all those things, that they don't have an address, right? And so when they go to court to try to get visitation time and they don't have an address, they're more than likely not to get that. So we have a lot of fathers that are now coming to us for housing assistance, and we're trying to figure out who are the principals, and particularly in Atlanta, to help us get them into housing and those issues. And then the other one, housing is second, legitimation is 2. Legitimation, and they move back and forth.
Okay.
But the other one is mental health. As we can imagine, with the pandemic and everything that's going on, people are a little more aware of their mental capacities. stress, depression, anxiety, all of those things that play a role in how they feel about themselves and whether or not they believe their state of mind is where it should be to interact in a system that they have a level of fear and distrust about. And so part of what we're trying to do is to ensure that we're creating products that are speaking directly to fathers. And so we just released a guide on having difficult conversations with your co-parent. Yeah. How do you navigate those conversations? We just also released one that is preparing for family court, right? And so here's a brochure. This will give you tips on how do you go into family court. And now we're working on 2 others. The second one is self-care and mental health. Mm-hmm. How to recognize when you're stressed, depressed, where you should go, how you should talk about it, who you should talk to, the benefits of therapy and talking to others, life coaching and those kinds of things. And then the second one is family bonding and returning home from incarceration. Mm-hmm. And how do they transition back into their houses and communities, and then also interact with the systems that they're going to have to interact as a result of being here. What's next for you all in terms of child support? Like, what is it that keeps you up at night that you want to like solve and move forward and do better for families?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's lots of things that keep me up at night, but for Georgia, the big thing on our horizon right now is system modernization. I know that's not real exciting sounding to people, but it will be. So our system that we work with for the child support program in Georgia is 27 years old, and technology has changed a little bit in those last 27 years. So we're working on the process, and it's a very long process to do this, but hopefully in the next 4 to 5 years, we'll have a new system that will be current, it'll be modern, and we will be able to tell the system how we want, what we want it to do instead of us shaping how we do our work around the system. Mm-hmm. So with that, the benefit to our customers will be that we'll be much more efficient. We can build in, a lot of different things as far as collecting information. So it just kind of the sky's the limit right now. And we've kind of been working through the process for the last 2 to 3 years, and like I said, we've got about 4 or 5 years more to go on it, but we're excited about that. There's also some changes, at the federal level. You mentioned you spoke with Commissioner Gray, and I know she's coming out of Georgia. She's a real big proponent of the outreach programs we have with the Fatherhood Program and Parental Accountability Court, and I know it's one of her priorities to try to get some change at the federal level, to support those areas to where maybe the funding will be a little bit more available to states to have these kind of programs. So just the change in the program that's on the horizon out there from her vision is exciting. So and we're continuing to try to expand our outreach programs as well.
Okay.
Over the last 3 years, we've been on an expansion program with our Fatherhood Program I think we had relationships with 6 technical colleges in Georgia to start with, but now we were able to partner with them about 3 years ago to where we'll have a fatherhood presence in all 22 technical college systems in Georgia across the state. So we'll have somebody at the location to help the parents that are in the program to tap into the resources they have there for short-term training and things like that that are important to the industries on where they live in the state, because it's different in different parts, of course. Where somebody that lives in Southwest Georgia, might have different needs than somebody that lives in the Atlanta area. Okay. As far as learning skills and a trade and things like that. So, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on in the future.
There's a lot that keeps you up, huh?
Yeah.
What's the most satisfying piece of your job right now? What makes you?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, just the PAC graduations and the success stories we hear coming out of that program and the Fatherhood Program. Just seeing somebody that's able to transition themselves. We don't do it to them or for them. I mean, they do the work and they get themselves there. We're kind of the GPS system. They know where they want to go. They just need some help getting there.
Okay.
But just those success stories are really the best part of it.
Nice. We, Fathers Incorporated is celebrating its 20th anniversary next year. And so I'm gearing up all of this kind of stuff that I want to do next year. One of the things that I've been contemplating doing, and my staff is kind of pushing me away. They don't want me to do it because they just think it's too big, and I'm not afraid of big things to do, is a statewide fatherhood conference.
Okay.
I would love to do a statewide fatherhood conference next year
in
in
Atlanta. Partner with you on that.
To make that. I think the time is now to kind of do that, to have these conversations about the state of Georgia and how fatherhood and relevant issues like housing, child support, legitimation, and other things are impacting the entire state. I think we can walk out of there with a lot of information and with a lot of enthusiasm about trying to figure out how to collaborate and work together to make that happen. John, thanks so much. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate our partnership. I really appreciate being given the opportunity to help in our way. Want to expand on that. Really, my eyes are towards how can I get to every corner of the state of Georgia and do what we do in Atlanta to help support your fatherhood agents that are out there, to help them even, training them and understanding what we're doing, and also going after, more grant funding,
right?
From the federal government that expands us beyond Metro Atlanta. We did in our scope of work get expanded into Columbus, Georgia. We haven't stepped in yet, but we now have the ability to go into Columbus and do some work there. And then we're also getting ready to, because I want to close that kind of triangle gap, I want to go into Macon so I can kind of close that triangle gap and try to start figuring out how Macon and Columbus differs from Atlanta, and start figuring out how our programs work in more rural areas of the state before we start stretching out, beyond that. So when it's time in 2025, I believe, to apply for the next 5 grants, we want to apply for 1 grant that expands us outside Atlanta. So I'll be talking to you about that in terms of what that looks like for us and how we can create those relationships. But thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you do. And I'm only a phone call or email away.
All right.
Thank you, all of you, for listening to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. My guest today, John Hurst, who is the Assistant Deputy Commissioner for the Division of Child Support Services in the great state of Georgia, where I now live by way of Brooklyn, New York. I always have to say that because my Brooklyn people will get on me if I don't mention Brooklyn. And so, but we appreciate you all. Make sure you continue to listen to us. Go to our website at iamdadpodcast.com to listen to all of our conversations that we're having around this issue of fatherhood. If there's any issues or topics that you're not hearing from me, let me know what those are, and we'll make sure that we get the people who are influential in those spaces to have those conversations with you. That is what it is we are trying to do with I Am Dad Podcast. We want to be the vocal voice of this work, and I want to make sure that I bring in all the innovative, progressive thought leaders in this space, regardless of what industry or discipline they may be working in, that's relevant to us strengthening families so that they can strengthen their families. Until next Sunday, God bless. Take care.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad Podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting iamdadpodcast.com. That's iamdadpodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.